A bunch of new data came out this week, so we discussed the findings and explore what it means for households and their budgets. Hi, I'm Martin North, Principal Analyst at Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to the Property Imperative Weekly to the 9th of September 2017, the latest edition of our Finance and Property News Digest. We released the August edition of our mortgage stress research, which showed that across the nation, more than 860,000 households are now estimated to be in mortgage stress, compared with last month's 820,000, with more than 20,000 of those in severe stress. This equates to 26.4% of households, up from 25.8% last month. The main drivers of stress are rising mortgage rates and living costs, whilst real incomes continue to fall and underemployment is on the rise. This is a deadly combination and is touching households across the country, not just in the mortgage belts. In August, higher power prices, council rates and childcare costs all hit home. If you want more information, you can watch our video where we walk through the postcodes who are most at risk. The latest Adelaide Bank REIA Housing Affordability Report showed that buying a house became even less affordable during the June quarter, with the proportion of median family income required to meet average home loan repayments increasing by 0.2% to 31.4%. Research from moser.com.au showed that 1/3 of first-time buyers were reliant on help from the bank of mum and dad, and that the average value of that assistance in New South Wales was $88,250. This is pretty similar to our own findings on the rise of the bank of mum and dad. Data from Roy Morgan research highlighted the fact that more Australians are now underemployed than at this time last year, with 1.24 million, or 9.5% of Australians, underemployed. By that we mean looking for work or looking for more work, up a significant 324,000 or 2.4% from a year ago. They also called the real unemployment rate at 10.2% as opposed to the official ABS data at 5.6%. CoreLogic said that whilst auction clearance rates were pretty firm, the volume of sales continued to fall. But there is no stopping the housing train. Demand for property is still strong, but the mix of purchases is changing, as shown by the housing finance data from the ABS, which came out on Friday. Owner-occupied purchases are steaming ahead, whilst investment lending is stagnating. This is a clear reflection of the tightening in investor lending regulation and the availability of new incentives and grants for first-time buyers, alongside the attractor loan rates for new borrowers. We saw first-time buyers more active in New South Wales and Victoria, two states where new concessions started in July. The proportion of first-time buyers rose to 16.6% in July from 14.9% in June, but just remember that back in 2009 they comprised more than 30% of total transactions, so some of the hype about the return of the first-time buyers to the market is being overdone in our view. But in July, trend lending flows were up $33 billion, 0.1%, overall, with owner-occupied lending up $20.8 billion or 0.7% and investor lending down 1% to $12.1 billion. The number of owner-occupied transactions rose 0.6%, construction dwellings rose 2%, new dwellings 2%, and the purchase of established dwellings rose 0.3%. As a result, total bank lending stock rose again to $1.61 trillion, another record. There are some amazing attractor mortgage loan offers out in the market right now as lenders fight for market share. We see significant falls in some investment property loan offer rates, as well as discounts for new owner-occupied borrowers, with rates down to as low as 3.65%. These rates, of course, are not available for existing borrowers, the oldest trick in the book. So this may explain a rise in refinanced transactions. ASIC launched a series of videos to help consumers make, quote, money-smart decisions when buying a home. Some would say better late than never. The recommendations on budgeting are especially pertinent. However, a weakness of the money-smart calculators are that they are static. We think they need a calculator to show the impact of changing interest rates, for example. That said, their Track My Spend app is a really useful tool to get to grips with what is being spent. The point is that our research shows households are exposed to potential future rate rises. And whilst lenders are required to factor in expense and interest rate buffers, they are probably not sufficient to protect borrowers in a rising rate environment. And in any case, the majority of borrowers do not understand the financial impact of such rises, nor are they planning for them. Lenders should have an obligation to display the recalculated monthly repayments at an average long-term mortgage rate, which would be at least 3% above current levels. Households would be shocked to see the impact, and it may reduce the overreach which many are locked into at the current time. It all depends on when rates rise. Treasurer Scott Morrison said that interest rates are obviously going to rise in the future, but that many homeowners would be able to avoid mortgage stress thanks to mortgage buffers. It's worth noting that ASIC is alleging that Westpac used an expenditure benchmark that was based on conservative estimates of what a household would spend, and that it represents only an estimate of what Australian families consume. APRA said this week that it is important that lenders accurately assess borrower income and living expenses. Living expenses in particular are difficult to measure, and so banks often utilise benchmarks as a proxy where borrower estimates appear too low. In fact, APRA's recent work shows that the lion's share of loans by the larger lenders are assessed using expense benchmarks rather than the borrower's own estimates. There is nothing wrong in principle with using benchmarks, provided they aren't seen as a substitute for proper inquiries of the borrower about their expenses. But actually, in some cases across the market, loans are being made where the borrower had only the slimmest of spare income. The RBA governor also warned that rates would rise at some point and discussed why lenders may trade off risks in their book against market share. To stress the point about rate rises, Canada lifted their cash rate this week, and already there are signs of home price corrections following in Canada. The RBA held the cash rate again this week, and they highlighted the fact that the growth in household debt has been outpacing the slow growth in household incomes, as well as poor wage growth. They still hold their view on positive future growth. Some of the economic news this week was quite positive, with ANZ job ads higher, rising 2% month on month in August, the sixth straight rise. Job advertisements currently sit at 13.3% higher than a year ago. The current account data from the ABS showed a deficit increase of 9.6 billion, partly due to lower export commodity prices. Exports grew faster than imports though. Overall, the economy grew at 0.8% in the June quarter, and this was below expectations. But it was helped by significant government investment. Household consumption figures were also pretty solid, but at the expense of household savings ratios, which dropped to 4.6% compared with 5.3% in March. As a result, the current savings ratio is the lowest since 2008, thanks to very weak wage growth. The point, though, is that this cannot continue indefinitely because household savings are not infinite. And they're also skewed in distribution towards those with more assets and net worth. Stress resides amongst households with lower net worth and little or no savings. Dwelling construction grew a moderate 0.2%, with growth being seen in New South Wales and Queensland. On an annual basis, GDP growth was 1.9%, and to meet the RBA's expectations will need to lift over the next year or so. We're not sure where such growth will come from. We need to find new ways to lift productivity. Finally, retail turnover was flat in July, further evidence of the pressure on household budgets after strong growth earlier in the year. So to conclude, we still see home lending growing faster than inflation or wage growth, lifting household debt higher. This is at a time when interest rates are clearly going to rise higher sometime later. Lenders are still trading off risks against market share, because at the end of the day, households will pick up the tab in a crash. But households should not simply rely on an assurance from the bank that they can afford a loan. They should do their own work to calculate the real effect on their budgets of a 3% rate rise. In fact, borrowing less is the best insurance against future stress. And that's the Property Imperative Weekly to the 9th of September 2017. If you found this useful, do subscribe to get our updates and check back again next week. Thanks for watching.